Welcome, geeks and nerds, girls and boys, to a brand new episode of Geek to Me Radio. Tonight, we have a Marvel Comics legend, an editor and writer. Ralph Macchio joins us to talk about his work with Marvel. We'll talk about his movie adaptations, his work with Stephen King, and more. Stand by.
We're talking TV, comics and movies, and video games. And if you don't know Star Trek from Star Wars, we'll try to explain. There are 12 doctors for Hogwarts houses, one ring rules them all. To be the greatest Pokemon master, you must catch them all. You must catch them all. Try to catch them all. Gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all.
And if you're driving around the greater St. Louis area tonight listening to us on the Big 550 KTRS, hello to all of you out there. We appreciate you tuning in and finding us on this Labor Day weekend Sunday. You'll all have the day off tomorrow. You're welcome. You can sleep in after you listen to the show. To those of you who are streaming us on Facebook and YouTube, hello to all of you out there. Thank you very much for watching. If you are listening to this online, streaming it, either the KTRS app or online with the website, thank you to all of you out there who are doing that. And of course, as always, if you're hearing us after the fact in the podcast form, hello to all of you. We appreciate you finding us there. Hopefully, if you're listening to us after the fact, you've subscribed on whatever podcast platform you're listening to, and you've given us a 5-star review. That always helps us out with search engine optimization. I've got the chats up. I'm on top of it tonight, guys. I don't want to toot my own horn prematurely, but hello to My Flock, hello to Shannon, hello to Chance, all of you listening out there. We appreciate you watching on the stream. I'm very, very excited to introduce this guest. I met him for the first time finally at Terrificon after my friend Susan Eisenberg had the chance to hobnob with him at a convention a few months before. This guy is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so excited to delve into all the stuff he's had a hand in. Ralph, how are you?
First, I want to say thank you, James, for having me on. And second, happy Labor Day to everybody.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of nice having normally I go home after tonight, Ralph, and I have to get up to work the very next morning, very early. So it's kind of nice to have the day off tomorrow. Hopefully, you've got something fun planned for your Labor Day Monday.
My brother's going to have a nice barbecue tomorrow, and I am going over there. Today I spent the day at the swim club, even though up here in the Northeast it was cloudy for part of the day, but I try to wring every last bit out of summer, so I'm going to try to do a little swimming tomorrow, then head over to his place for a nice traditional Labor Day barbecue. So we'll have fun, too.
I can't imagine anything more lovely than that. That's a great way to spend it.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure, because I was very confused at first, because we all think of, obviously, the actor Ralph Macchio, and I believe I read, because one time they produced those in the Marvel, I think it was a Marvel Age magazine, it had that image where it says, here's the key to pronouncing all the different people in the Marvel bullpen's name, and I could have swore it said there, too, it was pronounced Macchio, but you introduced yourself to me as Macchio, so I am pronouncing it correctly. It's Ralph Macchio, right?
Yes, you are. It's, when my grandfather came over from Italy, he decided that it was going to be pronounced Macchio, and I can tell you that nobody in the family was ever going to deny him, so that's the way it's been since then.
There you go. All right, so I was correct, and I just want to point out Marvel Age had it wrong. I think Marvel Age had it pronounced as Macchio. So... But that's okay. At least I was aware of how to pronounce Ann Nocenti from that, and Bill Sakevich and things like that. So I think I got those correct.
Yes, we do. We do have a few. It could be Ann Nocenti or Bill Sienkiewicz. I used to, even though Bill and I became friends for a while, I used to pronounce it Sienkiewicz. And no, wait a minute, it's Sienkiewicz. So we got it all. And as for that actor guy, he's been trading off my celebrity status for years, that guy.
It's ridiculous. Now he's got some kind of YouTube series or something like that going on. I don't know.
Oh, boy.
But you'd be surprised, Ralph, how many people, because I was going around, I was trying to find a Saga of Crystar book, one for you and one for me, because you said you didn't have it.
Yes, and you got it for me. Beautiful.
Yes, and as I'm going around the con, I said, I'm trying to find this book. It's for Ralph Macchio. And they said, you mean Macchio? I said, no. I said, well, I didn't know he was here because I saw Martin Cove, who played Kreese in The Karate Kid and Cobra Kai.
That's right.
He's here. So they got two of them. I said, no, completely different guy. And it caused a lot of confusion. So people were probably going over there looking for The Karate Kid.
James, I get things sent to my house. I for the longest time I lived in the same house in Cresskill, and apparently fans of that Ralph Macchio Karate Kid would see my name if they were reading early issues of Marvel Comics, and they would see the address in there. I can't tell you how many manila envelopes I got with pictures of Ralph Macchio that they wanted signed, and they wanted me to send it back, thinking I was the actor. And you know what? I couldn't deny them. I felt bad, so I would sign it with my signature, and I would mail it back to them because I just felt bad that they thought I was the guy, and I didn't want to disappoint them.
That's incredibly nice of you. I don't know what I would have done in a situation like that, but that's I guess that's as good as you can do. I guess what you did.
I did my best.
We've got our friend Barry from Cartersville, Georgia. He does BK on the air down there. He just says hello as well.
Hello to him.
Nice to see everyone listening in the chats. I know Chance is from Atlanta, Georgia. Shannon's from right here in St. Louis, and my flock. I can't remember. I think she's Georgia as well. So we've got people listening right now, anyway, in both Missouri and Georgia. I tried to pronounce the two names together, Missouri. But it's Missouri and Georgia, so we got people listening in at least two states right now, and I know our KTRS signal reaches into parts of Kentucky and Illinois and up into Iowa sometimes, so we're hitting a few other states as well. So much to talk about with you, Ralph, and I guess I want to talk about, because, we cover superheroes on this show a lot, and I love hearing about people's origin story. So your origin story, if I'm not mistaken, it was Don McGregor and John Warner who kind of pulled you into the Marvel fold. Am I correct?
Yes, and a little bit of Chris Claremont and Roy Thomas in there. I can tell you. Well, first I want to say this is fantastic to know that I'm being broadcast around those states. That's a part of the country that I have not had too much to do with as far as if I've done a podcast or something like that. This is fantastic. So hi to everybody that's listening in. And as far as pronunciation goes, am I wrong, or isn't Missouri? Don't Missourians pronounce it Missouri? Am I wrong about that?
That's a point of contention. I always say Missouri, and I'm
Okay.
born and raised here. I think it depends on where in the state you're from, because I think people. And again, this is in no way me judging people who do it either way. So everyone listening, please don't send me letters or at me or anything.
No, please, no. I just thought it was pronounced Missouri. I thought people from Missouri pronounced it Missouri.
It really depends, because our former senator, Claire McCaskill, would always say Missouri, but that was when she was kind of more in the rural area and she was talking to those particular people. And
Gotcha.
Then she would go into the cities, and lots of people from here say it two different ways. I'm going to say there's no wrong way to say it. I'm going to say you say potato, I say vodka.
Okay.
We'll leave it at that. And my friend Chance just corrected me that Sarah is actually listening from California. So we're now bi-coastal.
Okay, that's fantastic. No, that's wonderful. So I'll be on my best behavior, believe me. So you want to hear a little bit about the origin? All right, I will. I'll give you the brief version. I was not a big convention goer, but in 1975, I'd gone to a convention in New York City because I heard Jack Kirby was going to be there, and I thought he's one of the big guns. We just love them, and I wanted to go. And I brought some books, some Thor books to get signed. I wandered around the convention. I was very new to the convention thing. I was a fan. I used to write a lot of letters to the comics, but I was not into fandom per se. I didn't have contacts with fans or things like that, but I used to write letters consistently. And it was also good because it helped me with my writing skills. When you write a letter, you really have to, be concise. You got to say what you got to say, and then be done with it. I mean, there's that old cliche that, hey, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. So I tried to use the letters as ways of honing my writing skills because I was going for a master's in English, and I was thinking about maybe I'd be able to teach English lit or something like that, maybe in high school, college, whatever. So anyway, I did the convention thing. I was wowed by all the people that were there. I think that's the one that Joe Sinnott showed up and talked to Jack Kirby, and I happen to have seen that, I believe. And then as I'm leaving the convention, now this I think was may have been in the Statler Hilton Hotel, but I'm walking out, and in the lobby, I was about to push the door. You know, I'm at the door about to walk out, and I heard somebody mention the Black Panther. And I immediately turned, and there was a table that was kind of out in the lobby area, and I walked over there, and there was Don McGregor, apparently, and I'd never seen Don, but he was talking about writing the Panther and signing the book. So I walked up to him, and I mentioned my name, and he goes, "Hey, man, you're the guy that writes all those letters to kill Raven and the Panther." I said, "Yes." I said, "It's very nice to meet you, Mr. McGregor." He goes, "Hey, look, I'm going back into the convention. Why don't you hang on for a while?" He goes, "You know, I'll take you back in. I'll introduce you to some people and all." So I said, okay, you know, this is all very casual. I was just going to get in my car and go home because I lived in northern New Jersey, where I still live, and I was just going to head home. So he brings me back into the convention. We run into Howard Chaykin, and he has a nice little conversation with Howard Chaykin, and then we meet a few other people. And he says, "Hey, would you like to get a tour of Marvel?" And I said, "Okay, I'm just here in the city. It's not that late." So he brought me up to Marvel, which was nearby, and I'm actually now in the Marvel offices, which I never expected to be in. I'm walking around, and Chris Claremont was up there, and I got introduced to him, and he goes, "Hey, you're the guy that writes all those letters to X-Men and Iron Fist." And I go, "Yes, I write to you too." He goes, "You know, I can tell from those letters that you know how to write." He goes, "How would you like to write an article on Conan for our fan magazine, which was FOOM back then, Friends of Old Marvel?" And he goes, "And interview Roy Thomas." I said, "Okay, this is all very nice. I got nothing else to do. Why not?" So he goes, "Well, you got to come up here because Roy's only coming up on Fridays. He's trying to decide whether he's going to come back as editor-in-chief or whether he's going to go and, you know, seek fame and fortune out on the West Coast." So I said, oh, that's great. So I began to come up on Fridays. And what happened was Roy was interested and anxious to do the interview for FOOM, but he was very, very busy. He just had a lot of things on his plate, and I kept coming up, and he just wasn't able to do the interview. But that gave me an excuse to kind of hang around Marvel, and I got friendly with a lot of the people that were up there at that time. And more, I just would go out to lunch with them. We'd go out to the movies, and I was just kind of hanging around. And then Roy, eventually, we did the interview, which worked out beautifully, and I was able to write the article on Conan, which was published in FOOM, and everything worked out. But again, I got very friendly, and particularly with John Warner. Now, John was the associate editor on the Marvel Black and White magazine line back in the mid-'70s. Archie Goodwin was the editor of that line, and I think Marv Wolfman at that time was the editor-in-chief. What happened was Marv left, and then Archie was promoted to editor-in-chief. John Warner became editor of the Black and White line, and he said, "You know, Ralph," he goes, "would you like to become my assistant? Because I need somebody." So I said, "You know, I was thinking about it." I said, "John, give me a little time to think about it." And I said, "Yeah, because there really were not that many teaching jobs back then." And I said, "You know, I can still go for my master's, and I'll come on staff and you know, be happy to work with you." So I got hired on staff as an assistant, and my opening act I worked as an assistant on Planet of the Apes, Deadly Hands of Kung Fu, Doc Savage, Rampaging Hulk, and Marvel Preview. And I had a great time. I had an instant love for the Marvel Black and White line. Everything about it was fantastic. And I just stayed around for, 35 years. I never left. And I'll tell you something, James. There's a reason. People have asked me, well, how come you were there for so long, and why did you stay there for so long? Around that time, people did not consider staying as an editor really a career. Basically, people who were up there as editors or really proofreaders or whatever, they were there mainly until enough books came open for them to leave staff and become writers. Even this was true with the editors-in-chief. When Jerry Conway came in for his brief time as editor-in-chief, he left with a bunch of books. So you stayed on staff only long enough until books opened. Steve Gerber was there. Steve Englehart was there. Of course, Don McGregor all these guys, Doug Mensch, but they only stayed on long enough until I could get 3 or 4 books, and then they pretty much left staff. I thought differently. I did not really like the solitary life you'd have to lead as a writer. Now, I did wind up writing things, and I was very pleased, really, with what I wrote over the years, and things came out nice. You mentioned the movie adaptations and your opening and all, and I did a few other things. But I really liked editing because I liked working with other people, and I liked being involved in the total process of putting out a comic rather than being home, sitting in a room, and writing a script. That just never appealed to me, even if it was for a comic book. So I decided I was going to stay, and eventually, I wound up on the color comics, then I wound up in the special projects department where we did the Warriors of the Shadow Realm and Epic. I was involved in the first few issues of Epic magazine, etc. And then when I became a Marvel editor, I sort of became the toy department because they funneled most of the toy books to me at the time. And I got Chris Star, which was something I had created with Mark Gruenwald, Jim Shooter, and John Romita Jr. And then I got Chris Star, I got US1, I got Micronauts, I got ROM. I was sort of the toy department. But I loved those books. They were a blast to work on, and I was able to give Kelly Jones his start as a penciler because at that point he had just been inking Jackson Geiss. On after Mike Golden left, I believe Jackson Geiss took over as the penciler on Micronauts, and then he left, and Kelly Jones wanted to get a shot at being an artist, and so I said, yeah, sure, let's give it a shot. So he became a terrific penciler. So it was good, and on ROM I had a good time. I was able to put Aiken and Garvey inking Sal Buscema, and I was able for the first time to get the dire wraiths. Anybody who's a ROM aficionado knows that the dire wraiths are the enemies of the Space Knights, the Galdadorians. But there was something contractual that they could not put or show the dire wraiths for some reason. So I heard from Bill Mantler, who was the writer, and says, Ralph, can we do something about this? He goes, I'm just tired of seeing these little yellow puffballs around that had them double for the dire wraiths. I said, okay. So I went to Jim Shooter. They were able to make some changes in the contract. And then I went to Walt Simonson, and I said, Walt, what do you think? Could you come up with a design for the dire wraiths? And he did, a fantastic job. And from that point on, we could see the dire wraiths. But anyway, that's going afield of what you asked me initially. That was my origin. I honestly, James, had never really thought about working for Marvel. I really had geared myself towards working as a teacher because I really didn't know anything about the office up at Marvel. I was just a reader and a huge fan of Marvel Comics, but I never thought I would go up there someday and work on the staff. But it all kind of just sort of came about very casually and very accidentally. And for me, very luckily, it worked out. So that's the origin of Ralph.
I mean, serendipity is kind of where I live, and it sounds like that was just such a great occurrence that just. Stuff like that would never happen today, but back then, that's just a friend of mine named Samuel had a similar thing where it was a Comic-Con way back where he's sitting in the lobby and sees Jack Kirby sitting there and goes up to him and says, Mr. Kirby, I just want to say I'm such a fan. And Jack Kirby grabs him by the arm, pulls him down and says, son, let me tell you, these people today know how to draw comics. And he has an hour-long conversation with Jack Kirby. I mean, that kind of stuff just doesn't happen now. It's so amazing. The fact that you had that experience is absolutely incredible.
And it sounds like it parallels your friends practically the same way, except mine was with Don McGregor.
Right, and of course, I don't think Sam ever got invited to tour the DC offices or the Marvel offices or anything like that at all, so bad luck on Sam's part. But it was a cool interaction that I love that story that he told me before. There's so much to unpack from just the stuff you've said. I'm going to take a quick commercial break.
Certainly.
We'll come back. I've got you for the hour, am I correct?
You got me for 10 hours, whatever you want.
Well, so everyone listening, it's going to be an extended edition of Geek to Me Radio tonight. We'll be going on till 2 a.m. We're going to take a very brief break. We'll come right back, and we're chatting more with Ralph Macchio. If you have a question for Ralph, you can send it on the text if you're in the chats, or you can text us on the KTRS text lines at 84126. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio on the Big 550 KTRS. Please stand by.
From preschool on up, our toys play on and on. Lego and Duplo building sets, the toys you grow up with.
I want my block back.
Snow Cat! Winning battles in the snow for G.I. Joe! G.I. Joe! American hero! Battling the Cobra foe!
Look, they're in the snow. Cobra troops. Get the snow cat and get the Jaws aboard.
The G.I. Joe Snowcat holds 10 Joes, and it's got a missile rack and torpedo skis.
G.I. Joe! American hero!
Cobra's on the run. Yo, Joe!
G.I. Joe Snowcat. Other Joe and Cobra figures and equipment sold separately from...
Introducing a new goodnight friend, Glow Butterfly.
Your child's goodnight friend.
And here's cute little Glow Bug.
Squeeze him tight when it's night. Watch his face light up bright. Your child's goodnight friend.
And pretty Glow Baby.
Glow Baby's tired, Mommy.
Good night, Glow Baby. Good night, Susie.
They're all machine washable.
.com/fiesta.
Hi, this is Matthew Waterson. I'm the voice of Magneto, Master of Magnetism in X-Men 97. And you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
We are back. Geek to Me Radio heard here every Sunday night, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. That's 9 o'clock for those of you like myself in the Central Time Zone. I'm your host, James Enstall. Very proud to be bringing you this show every Sunday night. Want to make sure we tell you about our comic book sponsor, another person I'm proud to be associated with, Larry Quiggins and Bugs Comics. If you've not been out to Bugs Comics and Games, you live in the greater St. Louis, St. Charles area, I don't know what to tell you. You need to get out there. I was just out there Saturday, and I was looking at all the stuff he's got. He's got the new issues. We've got Ralph on the phone here. Those of you who are listening, this is September of 2024. 30 years ago. Oh my gosh. See in my brain. 40 years ago this month, Transformers #1 hit the comic book stands, and they just did a reissue of Transformers #1. There's a couple of variant covers, and anyone listening knows I'm a sucker for variant covers, so I grabbed a couple of those. But that Transformers one, so iconic. There's back issues, there's new issues, there's toys, there's games, there's cards, there's collectibles, all waiting for you there at Bugs Comics and Games. He's on Bryan Road in O'Fallon, Missouri. You can get him from either the Highway 70 or from Highway 364. Head out, take a look around. While you're out there, join the Avengers Club. You just say, hey, Larry, I want to sign up for the Avengers Club. And immediately you start saving money on your purchases, on your new issues, your back issues, your toys, your games. The more you spend, the more you save. So it's a really great system in this economy when things start costing more like gas and groceries and you don't want to give up your hobby. You're going to want to go talk to Larry at Bugs Comics and Games. He had a lot of people in the store this weekend. I took my dog Grimlock out there, and Grimlock was running around the store. He picked out some stuff. I made him put him back, of course. I'm not made of money. But it's nice to be, it's a dog-friendly store. A great atmosphere. I mean, it's well lit. You go into some of these comic book shops, and they're a little dark, hard to read things. Great lighting. It's in a great location, and great comics. No one that I know knows more about comics than Larry. I'm sure he's listening tonight and taking notes to make sure I don't mess anything up as I'm talking with Ralph. But it's someone, if you want to get your comics from, you want to get someone who knows the industry, who knows what books there are. And I always say it's like having your own personal comics concierge. If you're saying, oh, there was this issue and Hulk fought Juggernaut, Larry will be, boom, Incredible Hulk 172. He'll pull it out of his back issue bin. Here it is. If you're looking for new issues, if you're a new reader who just saw Deadpool and Wolverine, say, where do I get started diving into this mess? He'll point you in the right direction. If you're a vintage reader and you're used to the comic books, but you want to get back into it, he can help you do that as well. And if you're at that point where you want to divest yourself of your collection, go talk to Larry at Bugs Comics and Games. He'll give you a great price for your comics. And then I've got more stuff to browse next time I'm in the store, which will be beneficial for all of us. Bugs Comics and Games. Follow him on Facebook, and also make sure you like him on Instagram. He's always putting stuff up there on Instagram as well for you to buy. So if you're listening outside the greater St. Louis, St. Charles area, like our friends Chance or Barry or anyone listening out there, you can see something you like on Instagram and say, claim. He'll send you a PayPal invoice, boom, and it comes straight to your door after you pay. Bugs Comics and Games, very proud to have them as the official comic book sponsor here on Geek to Me Radio. Talking still with Ralph Macchio, editor-writer for Marvel Comics. We talked about your origin story before we went to break, and I'm curious because I never had the great pleasure to meet the late, great Mark Gruenwald, and he's someone you work closely with on Marvel 2-in-1, on Thor. Talk a little bit about collaborating with someone like Mark.
Well, I helped Mark get his start at Marvel. He was from Wisconsin, and Mark had come to the big city, to New York, and he wound up working in a bank. But he had his eye on working either at DC or at Marvel. And he had come up to Marvel at one point, and I guess he saw my nameplate. We started to chat. This was around 1978. I had been there a few years before him because I started in 1976. And so we chatted a bit. I helped him get an interview with Jim Shooter, and he was hired on. We became fast friends, very close. In fact, I am his daughter's godfather, which, in an Italian family, that means a great deal, and I told him that. I was very flattered that he'd asked me to. And Mark was a guy that just was an endless font of ideas and concepts and things. When we would get in the car and go somewhere, and I would be driving, he would immediately get in and he would pull out a yellow legal pad, and he would start writing on it. He would never look out the window. He would just start writing. There was not a minute of time that he wasn't creating something or he was categorizing something. He was very into setting goals for himself and also setting he wanted to break records and things. He wanted to stay on Captain America longer than anyone else. He wanted to be the first guy to do this in comics, or the guy who did this longer than anyone else. And I had a chance to really review my relationship with Mark recently because Marvel has just put out, they're in the process actually putting out the second omnibus of Mark Gruenwald's 10-year run on Captain America. Mm-hmm. So I had a chance to reread all those, and I was asked to write the introduction to both of them. And it was just a really wonderful experience to kind of relive all the stuff that I did with Mark. When we worked together on Toon One, I remember I had come up with the idea for Project Pegasus, and then I wrote it. And then a couple of weeks later, Mark had read it after it had been published, and he came to me and he says, "Ralph, I got this idea that we can do something with Project Pegasus, like over an extended period." And he basically had the idea for the 6-parter that we call the Project Pegasus saga. And that had just popped into his head. And, we were on Thor. We worked originally with Roy Thomas. We were his East Coast liaisons. And he was just endless ideas. The Marvel Universe Handbook, which has been indispensable for people who just wanted to find out about the characters. Yeah. I know I use it all the time if I'm writing something and I want to find out about it, a particular character or concept, I can refer to it. Just a fantastic idea. The Contest of Champions, which I believe Mark had originated, that set the stage for Secret Wars and so many of the big crossovers, right, that came later. All Mark's idea. And I also remember that when I was writing the first omnibus introduction with Mark, about Mark, I recalled something that I had read in a book called Hand of Fire, and it was a book about Jack Kirby's career, strangely enough. And in it, the guy who's writing the book made reference to the fact that Kirby's second run at Marvel, it wasn't, he was a little bit uncomfortable and all that because the industry had evolved, and he said that the comic books were becoming very much like a Mark Gruenwald comic. The real emphasis on continuity, which of course Stan and Jack kind of originated at Marvel with Fantastic Four and Thor, as with Steve Ditko and Spider-Man. But he emphasized that it was really a contemporary comic is really a Mark Gruenwald comic, and I thought the quote that he had in there was worth putting into my my introduction, because I do know that towards the end of his unfortunately brief life, that Mark was having sort of second thoughts about the value of his career in comics. He was having some kind of primal doubts, and I would tell him, I said, "Mark, the things that you've accomplished in this field, your years on Captain America, Quasar, the stuff you did with me, what you've done here in the office," I said, as an editor and as working with Tom DeFalco as his associate, I said, "It's incredible." But he was still having a few primal doubts. Well, anyway, it's a shame that he didn't get a chance to read this, because it really said that a contemporary comic is really a Mark Gruenwald comic with that emphasis on continuity and interrelationship and all of those kind of things that was so much a part of what Mark brought to comics. And I'm just sorry that he wasn't around to see that, and I put that at the end of my intro, and I think my last line was, you know, Mark, you may have left us too soon, but you actually are going to outlive us all.
Yeah, I mean, I read that, you know, when I was much younger, I'd read, and I didn't pay a huge amount of attention when I was a little kid to who was doing the art and who was doing the writing, but I loved his run on Captain America without ever knowing it's the Mark Gruenwald run that I'm reading. There are just certain writers who I've been so appreciative that I've been able to have J.M. DeMatteis on my show several times, because I used to read his run on Justice League with him and Keith Giffen, and I devoured it as a kid, and then as I got older, my sensibilities changed. I'm like, oh, this person also wrote that, and it kind of change your precepts, and you go back and read it again with a new set of eyes. And to your point about Mark Gruenwald, yeah, he will definitely outlive all of us with all the great work he did. I want to pay attention to the chats again very quickly here. Larry Quiggins, who owns Bugs Comics and Games, who I mentioned, he wanted to say, Ralph, he wanted to let you know that you are one of those writers that when he saw your name in the credits as a kid, he knew it would be a very great story. So, Larry, thank you for that comment.
Oh, thank you, Larry. That is so nice to hear. I'm always flattered when people mention that. And, you know, James, one thing I wanted to put in here, when you had mentioned earlier about how he could direct people, you know, to certain comics when movies were coming out and all that, I have been, because people have asked me, what do you do at Marvel currently? Well, actually, one of the things that I have done over the last few years, really, is I have written evergreen versions of one-shot. I'm saying this wrong. I've written Evergreens, which is a comic that is supposed to be sort of a catch-all thing that tells you everything you need to know about the character and gives you the background and the history while telling a story, and it could fit in any era. And I would do this for the character whose film is about to come out. And this way, it would appear in a comic book store. We would ship it to the comic book store. And if a kid came in with his father and said, we're going to go see Doctor Strange, but I don't know anything about him, I would have my one-shot evergreen version of Doctor Strange there. And I've done that for just about every Marvel film that's been done. Black Panther, Captain America, all of them recently, more recently Spider-Man, Thor, Guardians of the Galaxy, all of those that were done, and they're one-shot books, and they just tell the story. They give you the history and the origin of the character. I did it for Morbius as well, and it tells a story at the same time. But we call it an evergreen, so that it could be, you could pull it out any time, and if you wanted to know everything about the character, it would be in there. And I'm very happy with those, and I'm happy that Marvel asks me to write those, because I kind of have that background that I can write a one-issue story and get everything in there that's needed. So I'm very happy Marvel asks me to do those.
That's incredibly cool. We have a call comes in from the 203 area code. I think this gentleman is calling to complain about something. Let me just double-check. Hi, KTRS. Who's this?
Mr. Macchio, I had sent in a pitch for Daredevil about 30 years ago where the Kingpin was going to be defeated by Matt Murdock, and I never heard back from you on it. And, I'd love for you to kind of respond to that pitch, now, today. I hope you remember it. Ralph, this is Dan Chichester. I just heard you wax poetic about Mark, and it's just so great to hear your voice. I don't want to interrupt your flow here.
Not at all, Dan. And, hey, I have to say, at Terrificon, Dan, first of all, I want to thank you very much for I read the recent run that you did on Daredevil, where you brought back the Chichester Daredevil that you did with Scott McDaniel, where we had kind of radically altered things. We gave him the different costume and all that. And I read it, I loved it, and I said at the end, I noticed at the end that you had given me a dedication in there, and Scott and all. Very nice. It's so nice to be able to tell you that, Dan. And also, at Terrificon, I was on a panel for I guess it was the 50th anniversary of Daredevil, or 60th, I guess it is now.
Yes, the giant one, yep.
Yeah, and I had a chance, because we were talking a lot about the Miller run, and Mark Waid was up there, and we talked about the Bendis run, and I said, listen, you guys should go back and read the Dan Chichester run, especially when we did Fall from Grace, and then we did Tree of Knowledge. And I mentioned Tree of Knowledge specifically because I said, today everybody is talking about artificial intelligence. And I said Dan Chichester was decades ahead, because if you read Tree of Knowledge, it's all about artificial intelligence. And I said, Dan, that whole thing was so prescient. You were so on the money with where things were going. I said it was wonderful. I just reread it recently, and of course, Fall from Grace. And I wanted to say, listen, don't pass over the Chichester run on Daredevil. We all love the Miller run, and we all love the Ann Nesenti run with Romita Jr. I said, but what Dan did, I said, knocked it right out of the park, and I was as proud of that run as I was with anything I did with Miller or with Ann. And I've told people specifically, go back and read Fall from Grace, but read Tree of Knowledge. It is so contemporary and so relevant that you'll be blown away by it.
Ralph, that is so wonderful of you to say, and I cannot thank you enough. And overall, we could have a love fest, for this whole thing, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, you and I haven't spoken in way too long. I'd hoped to get to Terrificon to see you, and some personal stuff got in the way. But you gave me such an opportunity, such a chance, with Daredevil, with giving me that run. I mean, I know I won you over with stuff, but you were still taking a chance, and it meant everything to me. To have your guidance, your respect, the opportunity to work on that character, to tell the stories that we did together, and in terms of editorial knowledge, I was just saying to somebody the other day, like your knowledge of the characters and your ability to sort of guide them, and it also give us all, I think, the freedom, to do the things that we did, especially on something like Fall from Grace, where, we did take a lot of big swings and crazy stuff.
Yes, we did. Yes, Dan.
And I remember Stan, saying to me at one point when we were changing the costume, it's like, so you're changing the costume for this? And yes, Stan, we're doing it for this reason and that reason. And he just looks at me and says, well, I hope you know what you're doing.
That was Stan, yes. No, Dan, it was quite a pleasure to work with you, and you were fantastic. Your talent is really just right up there at the top, and I loved working with you, and I love working with Scott. And when we needed to just change on a dime and do something radical with Daredevil, I mean, you brought the game, you brought your A game, and so did Scott, and it was just fantastic. And I did love working with you. And by the way, I also didn't de-emphasize the Fall of the Kingpin. I was asked to sign a lot of copies of that when I was at the convention, and I even had a poster made of the trade paperback cover. So that was another one of your many triumphs on Daredevil too, with Lee Weeks.
Yes, thank you. Lee was, yes, you gave us both that chance to run up to that issue and do the unthinkable at that point, to really kind of put Wilson, in his place. So, props
and he never forgave
for that. And no, they never did, so we're going to get him back on top. But I'll leave the rest of the show to you. But I did very importantly to me, when they asked me back to do that Black Armor, issue, and I'm glad you got a chance to see it, to kind of give you and Scott and Lee, the respect you guys deserve for really being, again, incredible partners and really allowing me to, bring forward, I would hope, very good storytelling. And even doing this story now, it just brought a rush back. And if that story works out well, it's because of, the influence of you and those guys. So, again, thank you so much.
Dan, thank you. It was, as I said, a pleasure and a privilege to work with someone as talented as you, someone as nice as you also. I mean, you were one of the nicer guys I ever worked with, and I loved it. So it's so flattering that you put that little dedication at the end. That was really nice. And I just loved reading that. Again, I was like taking me back to when we did all that radical stuff on Daredevil. So, Dan, you hold your head up high. You contributed as much to Daredevil as any other creator on that book ever.
You're a prince, Ralph. Now I'll get off the phone and you can make fun of me. But listen.
Happy Labor Day, buddy.
Same to you, man. Take it easy.
Take care.
Thanks so much, Dan. I appreciate you calling in, Dan. That was great. Thank you so much.
Good, guys.
That was really nice. I didn't expect that. I really thought for a second that was somebody who turned it. I was waiting for the, I turned in that thing about Daredevil, about the Kingpin, and how come you guys took him down? And that was really my story, and that's what I was waiting to hear.
No, he texted. I texted him on Twitter and said, "Hey, I've got Ralph on. I think it'd be great if you have a story or something you could prompt me." I said, "Even if you want to call in." And I just happened to look at the phone banks and see a 203 area code. I'm like, "Oh, I'll bet that's him calling in." So I'm glad he was able to call in. That's so nice.
That's fantastic, James. Thank you very much. To reconnect with Dan, that makes the whole conversation worthwhile.
Good. No, that's always great. I just, like I said, you have no idea, Ralph. For me, as a comic book fan since I was in grade school, what an absolute 8-year-old me would be blown away by the people who I now have the privilege of having conversations with, people like you and with Dan and with all these great creators now. It boggles my 8-year-old mind.
Well, I love talking about this stuff. I don't have, and talking to guys like you who grew up with the comics and have a real love for it. I don't have, people have asked me, can I get in touch with you on Facebook? And I don't have a social media presence, and I really don't want to have one. I love talking. I'll do a podcast and I'll drop into some conventions and things like that. But I'm really not a Facebook guy or a Twitter guy or whatever they call it now, X or something. I'm not into that. And part of that is I really don't think people want to know what I had for breakfast. And I know a lot of these things, that's what people get into.
That's Instagram, yeah. That's all
right?
that is.
Yeah, that sort of stuff. And so I say, I don't think I'm like people said. You have a page in, or you have a Wikipedia page. I said, that's nice. And they said, well, haven't you gone to it? And I said, no, because the last person I want to read anything about is me. So I've never been to my Wikipedia page. And they say, yeah, but they got your birth date wrong. And I said, I don't care. I'm never going to it, and it's okay. The only thing I'm worried about is when they fill in the second date.
Oh, yeah. As long as your family remembers your birthday, that's all that really matters, right?
You got it, James. That's it.
And again, the hour is flying by. I'm going to take one more quick commercial break.
Okay.
So we're going to do that very quickly here. If you're listening, we are talking for the rest of the hour with Ralph Macchio all about his work and working on Marvel. We have a few more tidbits that we want to cover when we come back. So if you're listening, stand by. You're listening to Geek to Me Radio on the Big 550 KTRS. We'll be right back.
2. Now the real fun begins.
Battle Armor Skeletor and He-Man figures each sold separately from the Masters of the Universe collection. Beastman figure also sold separately from Mattel.
Can you keep a secret? Good. Then come closer. This is Baby Secrets. She talks.
For a secret, touch my heart.
And she whispers.
Baby Secrets loves you.
I love you, Baby Secrets.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Baby Secrets. Her secrets are just for you. You're my best friend.
Your secret friend.
Baby Secrets. Secrets just for you.
There's one way to tell how powerful a rig is. They call it a pull contest. And now, there's a test of strength for Stomper 4x4s. The Stomper official competition pull set. Battery not included. A Stomper 4x4 and a match set of counterbalance, ramp, and weight box. Hitch up the truck and turn its motor on. You can put that four-wheel drive to the test and discover just how much power you're playing with. The Stomper official competition pull set comes with everything you see here.
Hello, everyone. This is Paul Soules, voice of Spider-Man and Hermie, the Misfit Elf, wanted to be a dentist on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Coming to you on Geek to Me Radio. Hope you enjoy. Talk with you soon.
Here comes the Spider-Man.
We are back. Geek to Me Radio. I'm your host, James Enstall. Special thanks to Dan Chichester for calling in. That was a lot of fun hearing from him, and he got to talk a little bit with his former editor. I want to make sure we thank our premier sponsor, the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau. You know them from the website discoverstcharles.com. Boy, it's been nice weather. We've had a couple of days of heat recently, but other than that, it's been a fairly nice August. So if you've hopefully had the chance to get down and walk around Frontier Park or explore the cobblestone-lined streets in Main Street on St. Charles, check out some of the shops and restaurants. It's been a beautiful time to go check it out. And you know what? Today is the first day of September. Next month is October, which means Legends and Lanterns, their big Halloween festival, is right around the corner. And that's going to be a lot of fun. The last 3 weekends of October, you can go down and talk with and interact with living history characters like the Queen of Hearts, like Lizzie Borden. You can talk to all sorts of people like the Brothers Grimm, who will tell you all about the fantastical characters they've created. You can get dog walking lessons from the Big Bad Wolf, and you can even sing karaoke with the Phantom of the Opera. All sorts of cool things going on all the time along Main Street and in St. Charles. If you're wondering about that one, or maybe their Christmas festival celebrating its 50th season this year, check them out at the website, discoverstcharles.com. You can take a Hit the Bricks tour and go down there and walk along the cobblestone streets with a tour guide who will tell you all about all the cool things that happen up and down that street. If you don't want to just read the historical markers that are in place, have someone tell you the history, have someone explain it to you so you can live the history. It's a fantastic place to visit. A lot of great restaurants and shops. And remember, this coming May, actually, I keep saying next May, the coming May is our brand new Two Rivers Comic Con. Very excited to be bringing you this Comic Con and very excited to be having it in St. Charles. Check out the website, the number 2 riverscomiccon.com. You can see some of the guests we've already announced, like Susan Eisenberg, Phil Lamar. We've got Keith Williams. We have the aforementioned Roy Thomas will be in attendance as well. We've got applications for vendors and sponsors still available at that website, so check that out. But I could not think of a better place to host this con than Historic St. Charles. I've been partnering with them and working with them and their festivals for 25 years now, and I'm only 22, so I'm not sure how that's mathematically possible, but still, it's a great place to visit, so make sure you check them out. Very proud to have them as our premier sponsor. They've been with me since day one of this radio show when I started in 2016 with this show. They've been with me as my premier sponsor, so show them some love. Go check them out. Pay a visit. Visit the shops, buy something from these quaint little stores and boutiques, and grab some great food while you're down there. You will be pleased that you did. Again, discoverstcharles.com. As we always say, it's an historically good time. Speaking of good time, we still have about 10 minutes left to chat with Ralph Macchio. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because we talked briefly, I mentioned Transformers, and you mentioned you were the toy department guy, but working with Stephen King on the adaptation of his Dark Tower series, that must have been a very surreal experience.
I have to say it was incredible to be in the room when he came up for the first meeting that we had with Dan Buckley, our publisher, and Joe Quesada, the editor-in-chief at the time. And I was in there, and it was they all knew that I was a huge Stephen King fan, so it was nice of Dan and Joe to ask me to edit it. Now, I wanted to say one thing. Stephen was very clear when we had our first meeting. He did not want us to adapt The Dark Tower. We did adapt The Stand, but he wanted us to expand upon the early days of Roland. That was something that he had in his mind. In fact, when he came in to sit down, he said, my line that you can take with you when you're coming up with your stories is this: a boy's tests becomes a man's quest. So Roland Deschain's early days, the tests that he went to become the gunslinger, that was the spine on which we built those stories. And we really did not actually adapt the Dark Tower books because Stephen King really didn't want us to. So we were very careful about not saying that we did adaptations of it, that we expanded upon Roland's early days. And again, it was really surreal. I mean, I can remember one time, Joe Quesada, when we got Stephen to come to the New York convention, and we were going to have a panel we were all going to be on, I remember Joe coming to me going, Ralph, we work with some big people. He goes, but Stephen King? But I have to tell you, he couldn't have been nicer, friendlier. He gave me his private email, and we still email back and forth about various things. I always email him on his birthday, coming up this month, in fact.
Yeah.
And we have great chats and things. And when he was at the New York convention, he asked to see me in the green room. I was outside talking, and we went in the back, and we were working in the Dark Tower, which he loved. And then he said to me, he was kidding around, and he was taking pictures back there with all of us. And Steven's a very tall guy. So some pictures he took with some of us guys who are a little shorter is he would put his head on top of ours so that he could take the picture. And he was just a great guy. You never know that if he wanted to, he could have been the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but he was just like another one of the guys. And he mentioned to me, he says, Ralph, he goes, I'm happy with what you guys are doing on Dark Tower. He goes, would you be interested in adapting The Stand? And I froze for a minute, and I said, Stephen, I said, look, that's way above my pay grade, but if you can convince them to do it, I said I would be more than happy to do it. And I worked with his, when we actually put the books together, and I have to give compliments to everyone who worked on that book, especially Jay Lee, whose artwork was just, beyond anything anybody had ever seen before.
It's phenomenal.
Right, visualizing that world of Roland Deschain, Midworld, etc. And then when we were getting it done, it took Jay a long time, obviously, to pencil it. And by contract, we were supposed to give Chuck Verrill, who was Stephen King's main man at that time, about a week to 2 weeks to read it over, make comments, and get it back to us. Well, to make shipping, we usually we could give him about 2 hours to read it, and then we had to get it back. And once again, instead of going, hey, contractually, we have all this time, Chuck couldn't have been nicer, as was Stephen. They understood our publishing schedule and that it took a long time to put this out, and that it may have been a little unreasonable to give them 2 weeks to get this, to give them time to read it. And so Chuck would actually read it over in that time period, and he would send back these very cogent, he would have made a brilliant editor, this guy, very smart, cogent comments. He would find mistakes that we had missed, grammatical mistakes and things like that. So it was wonderful working with him. And then, again, the same thing with The Stand, where I had a totally different team, but we managed to keep everybody on there. And there were times where they were going to try to take like an inker from me or a colorist from me for one issue, and I made a big point of saying, you can't do that because eventually this is going to be run as a hardcover. And if you start making the art look different, it's not like there's going to be a month between books now. Somebody's going to be reading this, and they're going to go from chapter to chapter, and if they start seeing differences in the art, it's going to take them out of the story.
Right.
So I won all those battles, and I was very proud of what we did. One other thing we did with Stephen, there was a brilliant short story that he wrote, Lovecraftian. It was called N, and we also did an adaptation of that. And I was very proud of the way that came out. That was something else that we did that's been kind of underappreciated or not noticed as much. But I couldn't be happier, and I'm so happy to keep up my conversation with him, via email and stuff. In fact, even recently, we were rewatching Creepshow, and my sister-in-law, who's a big Stephen King fan, we were watching it, and at the end of one of them, the one where he plays Geordie Verrill, who gets all, he's a guy nothing goes right for, and at the end, right? Yeah. At the end, he's going to kill himself because he's got this moss that's grown all over him from this meteor that fell. And so that the only thing that goes right for him is that he's able to kill himself and shoot himself. Well, my sister-in-law said, I think it would be really cool if the gun didn't go off, and even then things didn't work for him. So I thought that was such a cool idea that I emailed Stephen King about it, and shortly thereafter he got back to me on it, and he goes, hey, that was really a great idea. And he goes, here's what I think Geordie would have said if that had been the way it had ended. So he was so nice about that. And when I told it to my sister-in-law, she did cartwheels. She goes, Stephen King knows who I am. This isn't...
That almost reminds me of the ending. It's one of my favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone with Burgess Meredith, Time Enough at Last, where he finally has the moment he sits down and his glasses break.
Oh,
what you just mentioned kind of reminds me of that a little bit.
Yes. Here he is. All he wants is the time to sit there in front of the library and read his books endlessly. And then I thought that was kind of sad because he wasn't a bad guy. It's not like he was getting his comeuppance.
Right.
He was just a good guy, and this happened.
Yeah, you're going to get a good Twilight Zone episode if Burgess Meredith shows up, because I think he did 5 of those suckers. We're at the very end of our time. My outro music is going to play here, and I feel like, Ralph, we barely scratched the surface. So hopefully I can convince you to come back on, because I've got a whole sheet of questions here that I didn't even get to.
Anytime, James. I knew we wouldn't get to too much over the hour, but that's why I said I'm here for 10 hours. But you just set the date, and I will be back. And if the good people listening want me back, I certainly will be up for it.
No, we've got a bunch of questions. Like I said, I haven't got enough time to ask them these. I've got my friend Chance in Atlanta wanted to ask you about the character Madcap. So Chance, if you're listening, I've run out of time, but we'll have Ralph back on, and we'll make it a point to talk about that at the very beginning of the hour next time, because we're going to be playing the outro song here, and I've got the end of my show. So unless really like within I've got a few minutes. Do you remember the character of Madcap?
Yes. In fact, if you pick up the first omnibus, tell your buddy to pick up the first omnibus of Mark Gruenwald's Captain America. I talk about Madcap. Madcap was the first character that Mark had created for Captain America in his run, and it reflected Mark's sense of absurdity about life. While Mark had a strong sense of patriotism because he came from Wisconsin in the Midwest, and that's one of the reasons he was so good on Captain America, because he really came with those Midwest values, those patriotic values. But he also had a strong sense of the absurd, that life really has no meaning, that there's kind of nothing to it. This didn't necessarily reflect his entire philosophy on life, but it was an aspect of it. And he wanted to sort of convey that. And Madcap was that representation of Mark, of the absurdity of life, that things just don't mean anything, that you can just go on and nothing's going to happen to you one way or the other. And if it does, there's really no meaning to anything at all. And that's where Madcap came from Mark's sense of the absurdity of life itself. And interestingly enough, he put that in Captain America, the protagonist of who has a great sense of what life is all about and what the meaning is of his life. So I thought the contrast in there between Captain America and Madcap was very strong.
That's perfect. Chance, hopefully that gives you some answer to your question, and hopefully I asked it correctly and phrased it correctly. But
you did.
I want to say, just like I said, my outro music is going to play in about 30 seconds. I got to be out, but I wanted to say that your run on Avengers was my first run, because I always say Monica Rambeau was my Captain Marvel, because she was Captain Marvel when I started reading comics, and I loved your run on Avengers. So
thank you.
This is the part where I normally say, tell people where to find you online, social media handles, but we don't need to do all that, because as you've said, you don't have any social media and you're probably better off for it. But I do sincerely want to thank you for taking time on a Labor Day Sunday to join me on the radio, and we'll definitely have you back on if you're up for it.
Anytime. And once again, to all the people in your part of the country, it's such a pleasure to be talking to you guys, and happy Labor Day to everybody. Relax and enjoy yourself, and enjoy the upcoming autumn.
And Amber listening from the UK. I just saw Amber pipe in, so we're international now, Ralph, just to let you know.
Across the pond. Thank you, James. It's really been a pleasure and a privilege to talk to you.
You as well. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your weekend.
You bet. I will. Take care, buddy.
There he goes. Great pleasure to talk to someone like him with his wealth of knowledge. Thank you to all of you who are in the chat tonight asking questions. Thank you to Dan Chichester for calling in spontaneously. That was fabulous. And, of course, thank you also to our sponsors, the City of St. Charles, Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau, Bugs, Comics, and Games. And, of course, as always, I just have one camera, so I know which one to turn. Thank you to Joey V for making the show sound and look as good as it does. We've got video tonight because Joey V is in the house with us. So thank you to my executive producer, who's always in the studio with me. Thank you to all of you, and until next week, my friends.
That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio.
Thank you, Avengers Hydro Base. Good night.
The Big 550 KTRS.